CBD are three of the most popular and widely used letters in the field of holistic health and functional medicine in our world today, and that is the topic of this week's episode of Alter Your Health, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter. Nice to connect with you here and now. Thanks for joining us. If it's your first time stopping through, welcome. Feel free to subscribe, rate, and review. As always, really appreciate that. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest today and dive into this week's topic, which is, of course, CBD and hemp and everything you need to know about using cannabis products in your life. And let's face it, it's a hot topic. And honestly, I have been hesitant and resistant to diving into this topic. But once I came across our guest today, his website and his business, which is Rooted Apothecary, rootedapoth.com, I saw there on the website that CBD is not a cure. And I really enjoyed seeing that. I really liked to see that, it isn't a cure. I know it's not a cure, and it is often sold as, a magic pill, a cure-all. And the fact of the matter is it's simply not. So in this conversation, we talk about what CBD is, what other cannabinoids are, what the endocannabinoid system is and how it operates in the body, and also what you need to know in terms of using these sort of products in your life. And we also talk about Dr. Cade's product, who is our guest today at Rooted Apothecary, and how that product is unique and distinct from a lot of other CBD products on the market. It is a full spectrum hemp oil product as opposed to a CBD cannabinoid isolate. And we talk about how this synergy and synergistic effects of the various cannabinoids in the cannabis plant act to really optimize balance in the body. That's really what it comes down to. That's what I learned, at least. So our guest today is Dr. Cade Copeland. He is the co-founder of Rooted Apothecary. He is also a chiropractor and functional practitioner in Naples, Florida for the last 10 years. He graduated from NWHSU, Northwest Health Science University, I believe, in 2009, and dedicated his life to working with families to address health issues from a multidisciplinary approach to wellness. Instead of focusing on what is wrong, Dr. Cade's philosophy is to build upon what is right. And I really appreciate that philosophy to his health, advocation, and clinical practice. I also really appreciate Dr. Cade's philosophy and approach to the world of business and being an entrepreneur. So we talk about how he got into the crazy world that is the CBD hemp, industry. And we also talk about his, wonderful product that he's brought into the world. And by the way, if you would like to try out this product, you can do so with a little discount code that he is offering listeners to the podcast. And you could head over to rootedapoth.com/discounts/alterhealth to grab 10% off of Dr. Cade's Rooted Apothecary products. Or I think you can also just use the discount code ALTERHEALTH to get that 10% off. Let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to trying it myself. In listening to this conversation with Dr. Cade, obviously we're going to gain a better understanding of really how CBD is best used, how it's, I'm calling it CBD, but it's, the fact of the matter is there are various cannabinoids, so I'll stop calling it CBD. We'll call it hemp oil. So we'll talk about how hemp oil is best used and best, woven into a healthy lifestyle, because that's really how it should be used. It shouldn't just be thrown on top of a ordinary lifestyle expecting extraordinary results, right? But it does boost the healing force and really allows the body to naturally seek and maintain balance. That's what I learned, at least. The overall effects of these products are in the human body. So before we dive in, just another reminder, hit subscribe, give a rating, leave a review. Really appreciate that. A comment, a like, whatever it might be. Thank you. And without further ado, let's dive into this great conversation with our guest, Dr. Cade Copeland. So, Dr. Cade Copeland, welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast. I'm really happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate it very much. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm really impressed with everything that you put together. So this should be fun today.
Yeah, for sure. And like we were just talking about, I think our philosophies very much, resonate and align with one another. And I know you've become a master in the realm of CBD and cannabis, which is certainly going to be the focus of our conversation. And right off the bat, one thing that I really appreciate, and probably the number one reason why you're talking to me right now, why I'm talking to you, is that right from the get-go, you express how CBD is not the cure to anything. It's part of a puzzle that's incorporated into someone's individualized healing plan. So I really respect that, especially coming from the owner and operator of a CBD cannabis company. So, selling this product, but knowing the limitations of it, I think is just so important in our world today. So thank you.
Well, that's awesome. It means a lot. And as always, we want to be open and transparent. Like we were just talking a couple minutes ago, being on the practitioner side of it first. I hate being sold on stuff and overpromised and underdelivered. So yeah, we're going to keep it that way.
Excellent. Maybe a good place to start is kind of your slogan of the Rooted Apothecary, which is your business: rebelliously wholesome remedies. What does it mean to be rebelliously wholesome? I feel like those two words kind of don't necessarily get stuck next to one another.
Well, it's interesting. My wife doesn't necessarily love that one either, but that was something that I came up with. And so obviously the rebelliously aspect of that part is due to the counterculture, stigma that, hemp and the plant has had for many, many years. And so there's kind of a little bit of a play on that. In my eyes, when we talk about vitamin C, we talk about probiotics and essential oils. To me, I think hemp, full spectrum hemp extract is like the nature's ultimate natural remedy. And so that's where wholesome came in. And of course, putting those two together doesn't necessarily fit, but I love it. I love it, to be honest with you. It rings really good, and it has a little bit of making you ask a deeper question, right?
I think that's exactly what it did for me. Is it does ring well, and it's like rebelliously wholesome, that tastes good and feels like, risque and like, something that I might want to experiment with. So when did you start the Rooted Apothecary?
So I've been in practice in Naples, Florida for 9 years. And, for me, it's been all about widening my toolbox of how can I help people and how can I teach them to help themselves. So we've been using CBD maybe for the past 3, maybe 4 years in our practice. And initially I just kind of closed the door to it. We had more people asking us about it. And eventually I did finally take the plunge. I learned, and we pulled some products into the office. And I really encourage patients to read through ingredients and to do as much research as possible. And I did that on the CBD products. Unfortunately, it was very hard to find something that was a company or a product that was transparent, from the way that it was grown, to the way that it was processed, to the way that it was shipped. And so actually my business partner is a patient. And one day he had said that this $100 bottle of CBD would be a lot easier to buy if it had your name on it. And it kind of snowballed from there. We started brainstorming a little bit, and we decided to do it ourselves and stop dealing with guessing and somebody else's trying to trust somebody else. So we did it ourselves over the summer a year ago. We're actually coming up on a year now, and it took off. I have 4 kids. My business partner has 2. So Doc, we would literally tuck our families into bed at 9 o'clock at night. We would meet together and work till about midnight, 1 in the morning, and on this passion project over the summer, and go back the next day to work and start it all over again. And now it's taken off. It's a lot of fun, and we're having a blast.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I didn't realize it was just not quite a year old. I'm curious, before we dive into the more kind of bulk science and stuff around CBD and cannabis, I'm curious about the journey into the business. Entering this really hot field, so much action, so many businesses, so many startups.
Mhm.
Was there a level of fear or doubt or what the heck am I doing? How am I throwing my hat in the ring here with all these huge names, big business companies? What was that like for you the last year or so?
It's been a huge learning experience. But I think maybe to answer that question the best is, I wish Ryan, my business partner, was here with me. I really love to stay in my lane, and learning about the products, formulating the products, creating content so people can learn more, not just buy the products, but learn how to use them and why they're using them. That's where my passion comes from. And Ryan, I would probably say, would answer that question better. He's a very much a get it done person. He's a very business minded. If it's not easy, I'm going to find a way around it. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the two of us putting our strengths together. And yeah, it's been a huge, huge learning process, though.
Awesome. It sounds like the two of you are great partners, kind of balancing and carrying one another. And being somewhat of an entrepreneur myself, my wife being my partner, it's like when I look out into these solopreneur businesses, it's like, how the heck are these guys pulling all the weight? And I'm sure most people are not fully doing it all themselves. A lot of people delegate different things to people, but I think the emotional roller coaster of starting a business really helps to have a companion riding the waves with you.
No doubt. You're blessed to
Yeah.
have your wife in there with you. My wife worked in my practice here in Naples, Florida with me for the first 5 years before we started having kids. And I haven't been able to catch up since she's been out taking care of the kids. You're spot on with your thoughts there.
Yeah. So, taking the shift and the turn into the meat of this conversation, cannabis, CBD is such a big topic. Where do we start? Well, I think that maybe one place to start is recognizing, like you kind of lay out in some of your content, the fact that CBD, which is three letters that we've become so familiar with in our culture in the last couple of years, are just one chemical in this plant that has been used throughout history for millennia. So could you talk about what CBD is in the context of cannabis and maybe other things that might be found in the cannabis plant that might also be therapeutic?
It's so much fun to open up this conversation. So again, thanks for spending time with me today, Doc. So CBD is just a compound that's found in the plant. And the crazy part is our body, all plants, like you said, essential oils, fruits, vegetables, they all have these compounds that come together to do different things in the body. Where the magic happens really, and why CBD is worth the hype, is that we have a series of receptors inside every system in our body that when that CBD cannabidiol, that compound comes into the body, it interacts with those receptors to do certain functions. And we have it, like I said, in every system in our body, from the neurological system to the musculoskeletal digestive system. And that right there is really magic. And when we take phytocannabinoids like CBD or THC or any of the other phytocannabinoids found in hemp, again, they're best taken together. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's kind of like eating the skin on an apple and leaving everything else. And most people do it the other way around, though, don't they?
Yeah.
So we always believe and like to say that Mother Nature knows best. And so we like to keep it that way, respect what she's put together and how that, interacts with our body.
Could you talk a little bit more about the endocannabinoid system? And whenever I learn about different kind of receptors and molecules and neurotransmitters and hormones that are floating around, it's just always so overwhelmingly humbling knowing how little we know about what's going on. So I'm sure we really don't know that much about the endocannabinoid system, but what do you know? What are these cannabinoids doing in our body to keep us healthy and balanced?
So, well said. It is humbling to know how much is going on inside of our body at any given time. It's amazing. And I hope that we continue to learn more about that and how powerful it really is. I maybe a side note here. One of my favorite parts about CBD is that, and this plant, which I really again think is the nature's best natural remedy, is that it's not doing the healing. It's helping the body heal itself, which is just magical. So I guess to start, the receptor and the receptors, it's best to think about it like a lock and key. So the key is basically the compound cannabidiol, which again, we either get from a plant or our body makes its own version of that too, which is wild. It makes something called 2-AG and anandamide internally. That's called an endocannabinoid. And those act as a key to unlock the lock. And the lock is the receptor. And those receptors are littered all over the body, over every system in the body. And you also said a word that I'm going to borrow from you, which was balance. At the end of the day, there's lots of functions that the endocannabinoid system is responsible for, but all of them, what we see in research is showing is that it helps promote balance.
All right. Could you elaborate a little bit more maybe on, you talked about like in the guts and in the nervous system and pretty much all throughout the body, we can find these receptors. Could you pull anything out of your sleeves in terms of like one example of like more mechanistic, how these cannabinoid receptors are activated and then what happens downstream once these receptors are activated? I know this is just kind of like sciencey things that we, once again, not fully understand, but I'm curious just if you could have some concrete examples, which I'm sure you probably have.
So I wish that I had like a TV or like a big poster here, right, to use hand signals and hand signs. But so we're gonna do this, okay? So and let's maybe go down to the basic, like as small as we can, and let's take a look at the neurosynaptic junction, right? So remember, we've got a receptor coming in where the impact or the impulse is coming through, the electrical impulse is coming through, and then we've got a gap junction before it gets to the next one. And across here, this is where the neurotransmitter activity happens. So GABA, glutamate, right, serotonin, all of these neurotransmitters interact here. And what happens when the impulse is coming through this way, the body is going to tell what neurotransmitter to release. Well, on this side of the cleft, what happens is CBD, or I should say 2-AG or anandamide, actually comes through, and it will decide how long and how much of that neurotransmitter should stay here for communication. So if we think about an excitatory neurotransmitter like glutamate, right, what that does is it can increase our heightened emotions, right? So things like anxiety, okay? And what will happen is the body starts to see an overreaction at that site, that the 2-AG or the anandamide, those molecules, the endocannabinoid molecules, will scoop up that glutamate, so it stops that cascade, that reaction of turning it into something bigger than it is. And again, that at the neurosynaptic junction, that's an example of it creating balance.
Mm. So is there some evidence or have there been studies that would suggest humans are deficient in these endocannabinoids and we need to supplement from a phytocannabinoid like cannabis?
So I love where we get to put our practitioner hats on here and think so like-minded. Unfortunately, there is not a test out there like a vitamin D test that will say, yes, you're too high, you're too low, or you're just right. We don't have that for the ECS system, the endocannabinoid system. To me, I think that test would be unbelievably valuable for all of us, for practitioners, for patients, to actually optimize that system and to be able to test and to, feed that system what it needs. Right now we don't know what that is. We don't know how much is too much, how much is too little. But there is a lot of research saying that a lot of the diseases out there are actually due or contributed by a deficiency in the ECS. And so things like fibromyalgia or a sensitivity to pain, there's so many things, again, anxiety, depression, that are being linked to this. Now, of course, more research needs to come out so that we can confirm or deny that. But when you combine that with the results that people are getting as they use CBD, it's very, very promising.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And, I think back to all the other neurotransmitters like, serotonin, dopamine, and a lot of people think that depression, for example, is caused by a lack of serotonin causing depression, or maybe a lack of serotonin or deficiency in serotonin is just another symptom that correlates with depression. The cause and effect relationship is very hard to pin down and nail down and definitively and confidently rely upon. So, but it sounds like there is certainly a correlative to, endocannabinoid deficiencies and pain. And what other symptoms or conditions, probably anything, but what could be, or what have you heard of or learned of or in your practice seen associated with, or I guess the question would maybe more accurately be phrased, what does CBD help, or what does cannabis help?
It's such a big question. I'm going to answer this in two ways. I hope that's okay. Number one,
Yeah.
I want to just make sure and ask you, did you learn about this at all in school? Did you learn at all about the endocannabinoids in school?
Not in the curriculum, but there were, extracurricular talks and whatnot for sure.
Did you do this when you said extracurricular topics? Okay, I'm I'm teasing. So I had to have some fun with you. I'm going to answer this, I guess, in two ways. Number one, it's easy to talk about symptoms because I think in our modern health world, we always kind of do, well, if you have A, then you need to take this for A. If you have B, then you need to take that for B. And
we call it like cookbook medicine, symptom treatment. Let's flip our book and see what the treatment is for X symptom.
I love it. I love that analogy, and to me, anybody can follow the instructions on that. And I think in medicine, and maybe we'll do this, or say functional medicine, or we'll say the art of healing, right? There is an art to that process of dealing with somebody. It's not all the time, this equals that. So I like to kind of get away from that. But I mean, again, if you go on to my favorite website in the whole entire world of the World Wide Web, it's called greenmedinfo.com. There are over 650 peer-reviewed clinical research studies about THC, about medical marijuana, about CBD. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're separate, but the research is on things like Crohn's disease and inflammatory gut diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, inflammatory brain diseases, depression, anxiety, eczema, psoriasis, fibromyalgia, arthritis. The list is incredibly extensive. And when you start reading those things, it kind of makes you think, if there is a system in the body, if these receptors are all over the place, why would we just take it when we have a problem? Wouldn't we take this to help nurture that system, help it function at its best, help it drive balance into the other tissues that it's linked in and just so intimately in touch with? That, to me, that's our company vision. I think it's the next multivitamin.
Cool. I'm curious, first, the question is, these studies that you're kind of referencing, are they also on PubMed, or could they be accessed there and they're just kind of more organized on GreenMed info?
Yes. So the founder of that, his name is Sayer G. He's a phenomenal human being, and that is his hobby. I could think of a lot more things to do to have fun, but he, cruises around and creeps through PubMed. And then what he does is take this topic and distill it into an easy searchable database. And I think his quote is like the world's largest natural health database is basically what it is. So that site is phenomenal, and I think everybody should be a member of that and check it out. Invaluable resource. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, very interesting, because I mean, I'm a practitioner and I easily get overwhelmed by search results from PubMed. So if there's some way to organize and distill all that craziness, I am grateful. So very cool. Great resource. Another question that's coming up for me in this conversation is, if we were to say that human beings, generally speaking, have a deficiency or an imbalance in our endocannabinoid system, I'm curious if you have any theories or, hypotheses as to what the cause of that imbalance is on like a greater macro scale. If it's a disconnection from nature, it's probably not that human beings are not smoking enough pot or something like that. A lot of people, that's probably not the root cause of this imbalance. But I'm curious if you see or have hypothesized any other, like, root causes, and we'll put quotes around that again, because we can always like take the root cause and find a deeper root, really.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, just kind of talking about this, I wish that, we could somehow get an answer. But when you look back in history and you said it yourself, through our ancestral times, almost in every culture across the world, cannabis was a part of their toolbox for medicine. And sometimes it was taken leisurely, sometimes it was taken for, aches and pains and ailments that, that medicine provided healing properties. And so only until recently, as you know, there was a political attack and smear campaign against cannabis. And even in our country, up until late 1800s, early 1900s, that was in every medical physician's toolbox as well. And pharmaceutical, patentable business model came around, and we have not had that in our system or in our toolbox for a couple generations now. So to me, I think, of course, we've also had many other things in the last couple of generations, right? An increase in toxicity, an increase in fast food, an increase in convenience, an increase in, sitting down at a desk in front of a computer. We've had a lot of things change. So it's very hard to kind of pinpoint and say that answer, but we have not had that cannabis products at all, period, whether again, it's THC or whether it's CBD in our repertoire for, almost 100 years now. And I think that that's a huge, huge role.
Mm-hmm. I remember learning, years ago as well, something around the process of being out in nature and like connecting with plants and having your feet on the ground. And that process is actually engaging and activating the endocannabinoid system. Are you familiar with that, or does that ring any bells for you if you heard that?
So I've heard a few different things, and there's even some research saying that the model of the endorphin pain release kind of model that we've come to know is very different due to the discovery of the endocannabinoid system and how that reacts in our body. I wish I could talk about that a little bit more, and maybe we can another time, or go back and forth in email on that article. But I don't know enough.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All I remember is like I was talking about this, being out in nature and like having your hands on plants and like focusing on different shades of green, and all these things have a way of stimulating the endocannabinoid system. So when I was thinking about this massive, large scale deficiency or imbalance in the endocannabinoid system, it's like, well, it's just kind of a symbolic representation of our disconnect from nature. So supplementing with CBD or cannabis product can provide that, but maybe also in terms of the longer term, like real sustainable approach, it's a matter of reconnecting with nature. That's all I remember from that learning. And maybe I took what I heard and interpreted it into what I wanted to hear. But that's something that's always been a theme through me. And, my practice is really reconnection with nature, because we are continually straying further and further away. So
I think that's all great points, Aaron. I do the same things too. I maybe start daydreaming a little bit and trying to connect some of the dots, trying to look. We always call it that 10,000 foot view. It's so easy to put our blinders on as a practitioner, and we read this article or that article or this product or that product and think it's the cure, like we talked about initially. But it's really important to get back to that 10,000 foot view. I guess I forgot what I was going to say in reference, but make sure there's enough studies out there, about the importance of reconnecting with nature before.
Yeah, I love it. We need to make sure, go barefoot, but like, don't stub your toe,
There's always like a little undermining kind of thing talking about how, right, minimizing the importance of those simple things, right?
Right. Yeah. Do it carefully. No, we should be rebelliously reconnecting with nature.
I love it. You better trademark that, and we're taking it.
Yes, seriously. So we kind of flew over this topic before we dove into other things, but the fact of cannabis being this plant that has many different cannabinoids. Are they all cannabinoids? All of the phytochemicals in cannabis, could they be classified as cannabinoids, just for, languaging?
Yeah, so there's different compounds that make up that spectrum. CBD and THC are one of them. I believe, there's somewhere, I forget the exact number, at least 100 more on that spectrum of cannabinoids. Of course, there's terpenes that give a lot of the scents and a lot of the colors, and those have medical benefits too, which we're still learning very much about. There's flavonoids, of course, and we know that other plants and vegetables and fruits have those properties as well. So there's so much more for us to learn and how that interacts with our system, but it is an incredibly potent and powerful plant.
I'm curious, why do you think CBD has gotten all the fame?
Ooh, that's a big question. And
Like, has there been more research that is narrowing in on that individual phytochemical, and that's just where all the action is?
And it'll be interesting, I guess, as more research comes out to see if any of the other ones on the spectrum, are going to show more promise. But yeah, CBD and THC are the two that get the most amount of traffic and the most amount of interest. And, again, CBD attaches to those receptors to do and drive balance and unlock special functions in those tissues. But the interesting part is, I'm sure that you're aware of the difference between a full spectrum product and an isolate product. Again, it's kind of the difference between taking just one part of another plant. You could, again, like we talked about the apple and then the skin, but an isolate has just CBD in it. It's stripped down, it's pulled out all the other flavonoids and the terpenes and the cannabinoids. And that works great. It works wonderfully in the body. But when you use a full spectrum and you respect, like I said, Mother Nature, and you carry all of the other cannabinoids, all of the other terpenes and flavonoids, and including THC actually heightens the medical benefits of CBD. So it is incredible, and even just a little bit of it. I don't think we've found, or research has pointed the exact amount of that ratio, the CBD to THC yet. But in the medical world, of course, they're playing with the ratios between the two for different things, like a different ratio for pain versus a different ratio for depression. But again, when we have THC and CBD in the same product together, THC heightens the medical benefits of CBD.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of so many other examples of synergy in nature, like curcumin or turmeric and black pepper or something like that. And on that note, I know that curcumin has gotten a lot of studies, but it is just one, phytochemical in turmeric. And I think I did come across one study that showed that a full spectrum turmeric extract, or turmeric itself, no extract or solid extract or anything like that, is just as effective pretty much across the board as an isolated curcumin extract, even with black pepper or whatever thrown in there. So I think that we are definitely in this world of reductionism, focusing in on individual things. And I know that the goal in our reductionistic mindset is ultimately to gain a richer understanding of deep topics so that we can theoretically come back and synthesize a broader understanding of what's going on. But as is usually the case, we lose the sight of the forest through the trees, So, so I think that the full spectrum is always the way to go. That's how nature made it. So what I'm curious, when I was looking at your products, I know that they're all full spectrum, but it looked like there was, there's obviously small amounts of THC in order to make it legalized and that sort of thing. So maintaining the full spectrum, how do you manipulate the different cannabinoids in the product?
So I think, and I am going to say again, I'm always learning about this, and where I'm at right now in my growth, I can't wait to learn more. But I think that's a really big question for how they breed the seeds and get the seeds and do, to have an end product that's higher or lower in CBD or has a different profile of the terpenes and the flavonoids and the cannabinoids. And so that really comes down to, again, more of an agricultural question, which I wish I knew more about. But, it's terrible to say this, but did you ever watch the movie Pineapple Express? And they're talking about all the different flavors of weed right? And there's all these crazy names, and 10-pound hammer, and Pineapple Express, I believe, was one of them. And so they get their names, and maybe from the scent and the different profile of the phytocompounds that are in there. And it's the same thing for the product that we've chosen. We've worked specifically with our farmer to have high amounts of CBD naturally in the plant, low amounts of THC, and for it to grow in the climate, which is pretty close to you out in Colorado. And
Cool.
yeah, again, I wish I knew more about it, but that's really what it boils down to.
Well, you actually did answer, the large question for me. I didn't really realize, well, I knew theoretically that different plants have different levels of components, but I didn't know that it was just a function of the breeding of the plants to create a plant that is naturally high in CBD and low in THC. Because, when you're, getting a gram and smoking it to get high, it's kind of the other way around, right? So it's kind of like a totally different plant altogether. If I'm understanding accurately, the plant that you're growing to harvest for the therapeutic benefits of high CBD, low THC is completely contradictory to the plants that are harvested for their, psychoactive components of high THC, low CBD. But they're both, when you're smoking marijuana, that's a full spectrum product. And just like your product is full spectrum, just the spectrum is very different. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so there's the plants, marijuana and hemp they're two plants, and they're in the same family. So marijuana is typically bred, like we're saying, to have higher THC content and lower CBD. And hemp is typically bred to have, not typically, it's bred to have higher CBD and lower THC. And so it's exactly what you're saying. And there's also, which I'm sure you're familiar with, other uses of the hemp plant, industrial uses for shirts and for building materials and things like that. But with that being said, the highest concentrations of the medicinal components are found in the flower. And our oil uses just the flower. We don't use anything else in that plant for our medicinal aspect. But our carrier, to avoid any of the coconut sensitivities and autoimmune issues out there, we use organic hemp seed extract as our carrier oil. So
Okay.
everything stays in that family, from the plant.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to have. I would imagine it creates, maybe on an energetic level, a level of harmony in the body and in the plants. And I could just imagine happy phytochemicals that are like, oh, brother hemp oil, nice to see you again, reuniting.
We were once separated, but now united. Yeah, we've got some pretty happy farmers out there too. They really love what they do. And it was amazing. We visited the farm recently, and just the aroma of these fresh plants. We do our best to keep that and bottle that. And when you open it up, you can really smell the plant itself. But yeah, we've got some happy farmers out there in those fields that are blessing those crops for sure.
Excellent. So you talked about it's just the flower that is harvested to be extracted in the CBD oil. That's correct?
Yeah, so in the industry, it's called industrial hemp. And industrial hemp really takes the entire plant, the stems, sticks, seeds, the flower, everything, and will actually turn that into an end product. And for us, it was really important to use the highest concentrations of with the medicinal benefits, which is in the flower. And so that's what our oil is comprised of.
Cool. And I'm curious what the extraction process is. You harvest all these flowers, you got a big bag of flowers. I'm sure it's a huge quantity, but what do you do with those flowers to go from flower to your product, bottled in these beautiful tincture bottles?
So I wish it was just a wave of a magic wand and it would happily just dance right into the bottle. But there is some chemistry and there's a lot of science that goes into it. The process that we've chosen to the best of our research and the best of our knowledge right now for the cleanest end product is we use CO2 extraction. And, again, the end product there is we've chosen that the best we can. If something changes down the road and a better, less processed option comes up, we're going to jump on that and say that, we're always sourcing the best opportunities there. But that's where we felt comfortable was with this CO2 extraction.
Is that pretty standard for most hemp oil products in the market? Or
Um,
what, how, or maybe the question is like, how is your product unique and how is it similar to what else is on the market?
that's an interesting question. And I think, what I've been saying lately is, at the end of the day, there's only so many ways that you can put this plant into a bottle. And, again, for us, we have no fragrances, we have no perfumes, we have no preservatives. The plant is what you get. And, but I guess getting back to what you said, the other extraction methods, typically in the past, they've used some chemicals like butane, and they've also used, I guess I'm forgetting the one off the top of my ethanol. They've also used ethanol in the past. And so right now, I guess the industry standard really is the best, the cleanest is CO2. Now there is some, other techniques, and I'm sure people are constantly trying to push that forward for efficiency and cleanliness. Again, that's what we've settled on, and that's what we've chosen to do. I think where the differentiation really comes from is choosing the best species for gene selection. I think the health of the soil and proper farming techniques there is a huge part. Timing and growing it in the environment to reduce mold is a big part of it too. And then going through the CO2 extraction, and finally the carrier oil. So there's a lot of different ways to do it across there. But at the end of the day, there isn't a whole ton of options.
Yeah, it seems like, what you just said, the most important part is, of course, the health of the plant, the health which is dependent upon the health of the soil, the health of the earth. And I think that a lot of people, probably myself included to some degree, go to the market and look at the bottles and are looking at the prettiest bottle and the prettiest label and what, how much is in there. But it really, the most important thing is like, well, what was the health of that original plant before it was bottled up and, extracted and put into this? And I think that it's a really hard for consumers to know on any level. Like, even in the grocery store, we pick an apple and we think, okay, this apple came from a tree, but was that tree grown in this huge orchard that didn't have any nutrients in the soil? And was it like sprayed with all these like nutrients and synthetic fertilizers and stuff? Like, we just have to rely upon our trust of the farmers and doing what's best, taking care of the earth and kind of being connected in that sort of way with the land. So I think that's great that you, for sure, it sounds like you acknowledge the importance of that, first and foremost, and you're kind of relaying that to the consumer, it sounds like.
Well, I think you nailed what you're saying. And most of us don't go that many layers deep on looking at our food. We grab a package of apples or bananas and wonder how long has that really been here away from its source? When did it get picked? What was the water like, the quality of the water? How healthy is that soil? How healthy were the people that were putting their hands on it? And again, if it's traveling halfway across the world to get to you, how long has it been? How many nutrients has it lost? So, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. And of course, we do our best to be transparent about that and do things the best way that we can. But there's a lot of layers deep, and I think you nailed that.
Cool. So where in the state are you able to disclose around where in Colorado the farm is, and where, like, could people drive by and wave at the plants and stuff? Or
so it's 3 hours outside of the Denver airport, and it is in Joe's.
Is that like Eastern Colorado then? Like in?
I wish that I knew my geography better. Should I pull up Google Maps really quick?
Well, I would imagine most of the big, agricultural areas, I think, are to the east, because, the west is the mountains. So probably not, probably not in my backyard in the Rocky Mountains, but sure, it's beautiful still.
So I've lived in Naples, Florida, for 10 years, and I still don't really know too much around me. I stay in my little bubble, and that's about it.
But well, I trust you've been out to the farm.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. We were just there about a month ago. Yeah. So it is east of Denver.
Cool.
You were right on that. We were just meeting out about a month ago with our farmer and with our processor, which is always such an enlightening experience and humbling, of course. We went through the lab and looking at all of the chemistry folks that are in there. It's absolutely incredible. It is such a learning experience, and there's so much more to go for me. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that.
Cool. I'd like to maybe shift the conversation towards the end here to maybe the consumer side of things and what you see as primary misconceptions when people are, looking and talking about hemp products and cannabis products.
Okay.
What are,
So
like, maybe, yeah, what is the biggest thing that you hear in the media or hear people talk, those misconceptions around the products that you're providing?
Well, I think we kind of opened up our conversation with this of making sure that we have realistic expectations. If you do decide to take it and, have realistic expectations, it's not the cure, it's not the fix, it's not the solution, it's a part of it, right? And it's always important not to take something from the outside in, expecting that to be the cure. It's important to know that those are the compounds that are aiding your body's own wisdom, inborn wisdom, to do the healing itself, right? And, we do choose a product. There's lots of symptoms that it's going to help with, but overall, it's really important to take the thought that you're really nourishing that endocannabinoid system with this product. So read those ingredients, do as much research as you can on the company and how they're putting that end product. I think probably the big things to look for is that it's an organic product. We really like to make sure that things are grown here in the United States, and look for those fragrances or preservatives or colorings or sweeteners and flavorings. Read the ingredients on there, because if we are having something that's, again, a fragrance or preservative, or it's going to take away from, it's going to offset that scale. It's going to tip the scale towards something not being so helpful. And of course, the stress on the body to take that. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of being a mindful consumer, knowing what's going in there and being connected to it. Because the more that we can connect with our products, we're kind of connected, intentionally, we can kind of connect with the source of the product, and maybe, reaching out to owners of companies or people who work at the company, and just having that level of human interaction and communication and connection, and rather than just strolling down the aisle and knocking it into your basket and swiping your credit card. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great. And how about dosing? That's a big conversation. I know that we live in a culture where more is better, and I'm curious if you see that being the case with dosing your products, or obviously on the other side of things, less is better with like microdosing and this kind of nudge dosage. One of my botanical medicine teachers talks about herbalism as kind of nudge medicine, where you're just really subtly pushing the body to achieve balance naturally, and it's not the product or herb or substance that's doing the healing, like we kind of started the conversation with. It's the body that's healing itself, and the product is just kind of nudging the body in that direction. So yeah, what could you tell us about dosing CBD and cannabis products, and the dosages of your products?
Well, I love how you said that, and I think it's really important as a practitioner, or even a patient who's just experimenting with this stuff on their own, to understand what you said. It's important to know when to push, how aggressive to be, when to lay off. So we always like to talk about cycling. We don't want you to be dependent on the product every day for the rest of your life. It's important to have time on and time off, and so that we don't, of course, reduce the sensitivity of those receptors in the body as well. We always, again, encourage people that they know their body better than anybody else. And it's also important to know every person on planet Earth has an endocannabinoid system, no matter their age, no matter how healthy or sick they are. So you're safe to play with this stuff. You're safe to experiment, right? And there's even some clinical research showing that doses up to 1,500 milligrams a day, safe, no side effects. That's incredible. Now, I got to say that with an asterisk. Of course, somebody could eat an apple and have a sensitivity or an allergy to an apple. So start slow. We usually say start at about 10 milligrams. And take that for a day or two and get your body used to it. And if there isn't any side effects, there isn't anything negative happening, then if you've never used a cannabis product, we usually like to do something called a low dose, where you really skyrocket the dosing. So up to 30 milligrams, up to 50 milligrams, up to 100 milligrams, depending on how severe this person's case is. And what we do there is really give a boost to the body. We like to try to saturate those endocannabinoid receptors. Because here's another thing that I guess I like to say is, when we put this stuff underneath our tongue, or if we're applying it topically. There's all sorts of delivery methods, right? You could take capsules. When that hits the bloodstream, the wisdom of the body gets to decide, right, Doc, where it goes. And just because you've got pain here or you've got anxiety between the ears doesn't mean that that's your body's priority. It gets to decide where it's going to go first. So when we flood our system in high amounts of it, there's enough to go around and keep everybody happy. And if you're not experiencing, again, if you're taking it for an acre of pain and you're using it orally, well, you don't have to buy something else. Take that tincture and, spot treat where you're feeling that pain. And then the concentrated benefits of that oil get to go right there where you want it to, instead of in your bloodstream. And maybe for, say for liver health or for brain health, your body's going to do the priority itself.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think we often forget that, it's like, oh, I've got this symptom. I'm going to take whatever pill and that symptom better be better. But, we've got our egoic desires around what should be better. And then our body has its innate wisdom around what really needs to be better. So we don't necessarily have the power to choose the priority of our healing. Our bodies have us far beat when it comes to the wisdom and prioritizing that healing process. So I think that's important.
Well, we always love to say the greatest doctor in the world lives inside each one of us. So it's a fantastic weight off of our shoulders as practitioners, right? To lean heavy into that and know that each patient is healing, and that it's, again, there's so many factors into that. But dosing, the fun part about dosing, we always get that question, and maybe the simplest way to answer it is the way I answered it. But, we're prescribing food as medicine. We're not going to say eat 15 apples a day. We're not going to necessarily say, make sure that you're having this much, romaine lettuce on your plate and a little bit of arugula on top. And, it's food, and this stuff is safe. I want people to think less of it as a supplement and more of it as food. Yes, in the tinctures and the products that we have, it's concentrated versions of that food, but it's still food. It's safe. Go out, experiment, see what works for you, on, off cycle, and have some fun with it.
Yeah, I really, really like that reminder as well, because, plants are food. Obviously, there's some toxic plants, poisonous mushrooms, and plants can harm us. But generally, plants that grow on the earth, they're pretty safe, especially when they're, studied and analyzed and all the research is done. And I think relating to a product like yours as just kind of a food-based supplement rather than some sort of medicinal therapeutic intervention, I think that really kind of normalizes it, and it also invites it to be, more of a regular part of a normal routine. So that's great. You talked a little bit, you kind of flew over this concept of cycling cycling the dose. So does that mean like high, low kind of cycle, or what have you seen being effective with regard to cycling dosages?
I typically really like to start low, for a couple days and then shoot up high. And then after we've received the desired results that we want for anxiety or for pain or whatever the case is, I usually like to tell people to take as little as possible. And for some people, that's only having to take it when they need it. Some people, that's having to take it still a couple times a day, or maybe before they go to work for a big presentation. So, again, knowing your body, it's okay to be off of it. It's okay to get away from it for a day, for a week, whatever. Keep it in your medicine cabinet. We've just have this philosophy in our modern medical world that, the medicine does the healing. And if I miss my medication, then yeah, well, this is different. This is not the same way. We like to put things in a little box, and this is different. This is food. This is plant medicine. It is safe. We've been using it for generations, and there is a lot of research out there about it, and there's still a lot more to come. I think the product, as I've said numerous times, I think it's nature's best natural remedy. And I think the amount of flexibility that this plant offers is incredible. Again, things for memory, focus, eczema, psoriasis, gut issues, inflammatory gut issues. It's incredible for, and I usually recommend capsules for stuff like that. I've got 4 little ones at home. We've used CBD almost every day in our house, from a bump and a bruise to helping the kids fall asleep at night and help them relax. We put it in tea sometimes. It's unbelievable how flexible it is. And I don't think there's too many things out there that are like that.
Totally. And I think it just speaks to the fact, like we were talking about, how, it goes in the body, and then the body knows what to do with it. The body, it's not like, aspirin or something that has one effect and it just goes to that receptor and does that one thing. There are those endocannabinoid receptors everywhere throughout the body, and it goes where we need it to go. And I think that is usually the case with natural remedies. And I think it's just so interesting with a plant with so much history. There's been such a large scale suppression of knowledge, of information, of experience, and we're in the midst of this resurgence of that information. And I think that it's pretty amazing, and we can trust that the knowledge is there, the wisdom is there, and the plant knows what to do.
Well, I always encourage people to go to the documentary, The Sacred Plant, which is incredible. And in that first episode, it talks a lot about the political, what you're talking about, how we've really managed to get away from this plant, and for what reasons. I think for a long time we've been denied access to this amazing plant and the benefits that come along with it. Part of that documentary talks about the United States government owning a patent on cannabis for an anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant. And I think when most people hear that, that kind of starts to open up the door. And even more so in the age of the internet, it's harder and harder to hide this information, and there's a demand for it, and rightly so. I do not think that it's over-promising and under-delivering. I think it's the exact opposite. Get out there, get a product in your hands, start experimenting with it, and whether you're using it for a specific symptom or whether you're using it as part of your general wellness toolbox, I firmly believe you need to be nurturing your endocannabinoid system for life.
Awesome. Well, it's really refreshing to speak with someone who, like we started this conversation. First of all, it's not the cure. It's part of the process. It's part of the cure. And the medicine is inside. I think that's kind of been a theme throughout this conversation. And also on, the professional side of things, like obviously you're running this business, but you're telling people don't do it every day. More is not better. And I think that it's refreshing to connect with someone, professionally who's, obviously you stand behind your product and know how powerful it is, but you're not like just trying to sling it like snake oil. And I think that we're in this world where things are being slung from all directions, and we as consumers are having to really kind of wade through all this craziness mindfully. And as a consumer myself, it can be really kind of disheartening to be interfacing with all this kind of sleazy business. So anyways, it's really refreshing to connect with a real authentic, non-sleazy business like yours. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me. It's an honor to connect with you too. I'm impressed how young you are and how much you have got your head on your shoulders. That's really the purpose of what we've done. Before I'm a doctor, before I'm a business owner, I'm a father, and just like you, I'm a consumer, and going through that stuff personally too is so frustrating. And I mean, what's the point in doing that again? It didn't make sense to me. So, we do our best to not just deliver an outstanding product, but to deliver an outstanding content to people so that they can have confidence knowing how to use it, that it's safe in all stages of life, and give them some creative ideas to take their healthcare back into their own hands. One of my favorite quotes as well in the world is, "The doctor of the future is the patient." And, by you doing this podcast and taking the time, you're equipping people with knowledge so that they can be the best versions of themselves. So I am honored again to be with you, Doc. This has been fun.
Awesome. It certainly has. And that's something that I'm trying to convey to everybody, is that you are your own healer, like no BS, like for real, that's where it happens. And that this conversation, I think has been empowering, informative, knowing all these tools that might not be in someone's medicine cabinet, these tools that can ignite and support that self-healing process. But it's not the cannabis, it's not the CBD, it's not any of that stuff. It's what's going on inside. So we've dropped a lot of really great information. You've shared a lot of empowering stuff, a lot of great things. I'm curious if there's any kind of last remarks, final words, inspiration, or information around using these kind of tools in the healing process, and also finally, of course, where can somebody connect with your products? Where are they sold, and are they just online, and where can people connect with you and what you're doing?
So I'd say probably the best place to connect is our website. Our brand is called rootedapothecary.com. And I'm sorry, it's not Rooted. Our brand is called Rooted Apothecary. Our website is rootedapoth.com. And we've got some amazing products on there. And like you said, we've got some great content. I know that you look through some of that. And I'm hopeful that you and I can talk a little bit more afterwards and potentially team up there and get some content pulled out of you that we can share on our website too. But you didn't put me on the spot there at all, huh? With trying to leave some good advice for folks. But
well, not you haven't left enough. It's just, yeah. If you could actually get to the good stuff now, Dr. Cade, that'd be great.
I love it. Well, maybe the last thing I would say is, physicians, whether you're using a chiropractor, a nutritionist, a medical doctor, as a patient, you're hiring that physician to give you the advice that they're aware of and give you the knowledge and the tests and the supplements or medication that they know, right? But at the end of the day, you're the boss. You, as a patient, are the one doing the healing, which we've mentioned, and you're the one, making the call. So make sure that, whatever type of physician you're using, get to know them, get to know their heart, and, you are the boss. And if they're not working for you, find somebody else and get connected with, the website that you have, the content, the podcast that you have is phenomenal. And it's easier than ever to access that information that you're sharing with people. So I'm proud to be on this with you, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do next, Doc.
All right. It's been great. And thanks for taking the time to share all this information with me. I know I've learned a lot. I trust our audience has as well. And of course, audience listeners out there, check out rootedapoth.com for what seems like the highest quality, full spectrum CBD that is on the market today. So thank you, Dr. Cade. Peace and love. And until next time.
Thanks, Doc.